Breaking now at 9, a fire at a business in Forest Park.
That address comes back to the Dixie Package Store. Atlanta News First anchor Joe Gorcho is live there tonight speaking with officials. And Joe, what have you learned out there?
Well, first I want to start with that over the last 10 or 20 minutes, Blair and Tracy, we've seen people from this community pull over to speak with the people who run Dixie Package, which is a liquor store, to make sure they're okay after this devastating fire. Let me step out of the way so you can get a better look right now of what it looks like here. You can see it's a total loss. The roof collapsed, the windows are shattered, and there are people right now working on boarding up this building as there's glass. There's product on the ground outside of the building and pieces of the roof of the building laying in front of the store. Now, we arrived here shortly around 7 this evening, and you can see the response from Forest Park and Clayton County Fire. I had the chance to speak with the owner of Dixie Package, Harry Desai, and this is a liquor store, like I mentioned. It's also his only business, and he feels complete devastation in this moment, as one can imagine. One of the store's employees shared with us the frightful moments when the building caught fire. So at the time, he says, there was a storm in the area. The employee told me he just finished checking out a customer around 4 in the afternoon when all of a sudden he heard a loud boom from the sky, and then he told us he heard what sounded like an explosion from the back of the building, and within seconds, he says, the flames burst inside, and at that point his heart started pounding in fear of what could happen next. He found the closest window as the flames continued to spread throughout the building. He told us he jumped through the glass of a window out of the building, with this liquor store being completely engulfed in flames with the fire spreading quickly. He says he called 911 for help. And here's now Forest Park Fire Deputy Chief with more on what they found so far in their quick investigation of this fire.
Crews responded out here about 5 o'clock this afternoon. We had heavy flames and smoke already showing when crews arrived. Of course, there was heavy rain conditions already going on at that time. The contents of the building, of course, being a liquor store, helped fan the flames of the fire, which rapidly grew in intensity. Before long, the fire was out of control. We called in some mutual-aid requests also from other units to help us extinguish the flames.
Luckily, no one was injured, and that employee that in the store, I had about a 15-minute conversation with him. He's still startled, wondering what could have been if he didn't find that window to jump out of as the flames were spreading quickly. It's a difficult moment for the store owner here, Harry Desai. It's his only business, as now he tries to figure out a path forward to rebuilding and opening the store in the future. But right now, it's just taking inventory of a lot of the business that has been lost here tonight. Tracy, Blair, back to you.
And devastating loss for them, so thank you. Breaking now.